Hello, Erica, and I'm back again. Today I'm going to do a review of 3 poetry collections that I read recently. Disclaimer before we get into this, I was a little hesitant to review any poetry on my channel. I'm just now getting back into reading poetry. I read a lot in college and dabbled with writing some of my own, but I have since outgrown that hobby. So I'm not by any means an expert. I do not feel like I am well versed in kind of the language we use to talk about poetry. So please forgive me for that. But I did want to share these with you, and I think they're all really great. And so let's get started. The first collection I want to talk about I read in May, and that is The Anatomy of Being by Shinji Moon. I briefly talked about this in my May wrap-up, I believe, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. Actually, I might have read it in June. I don't know. I can't remember. Time flies. This is a collection of poetry that the author, self-published in 2013. She is an American author. She is quite young. And she wrote these poems between the ages of 16 and 18 or thereabout. I thought that the collection is very beautiful. I think that she has a lot of potential talent to grow into, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what she does in the future. All of the poems kind of have these images of anatomy or the human body or scientific processes utilized as metaphors, which I found very interesting. The poems themselves are a lot about young love, kind of naive love, destructive love, and things that, a girl in her late teen years is going through. I did find the imagery and some of the metaphors to be a little bit repetitive throughout the collection, like to the point that it was almost grating, which I didn't love. And I also could feel how young she was coming out through these poems. And while I do think she's an incredible writer, and I think that this is an incredible accomplishment, it in no way reads like a collection by someone who, has been publishing for 10 or 20 years. I will say that for her having written these when she was 16, 17, they are more mature than I would have ever produced at that age. And she is very eloquent for her age, but that her age still does show through a little bit. With poetry, I feel like you can talk about it until you're blue in the face, but that it's important to hear it. So I'm just going to read you the last couple of stanzas of one of my favorite poems. This poem is called What the Body Knows, and the last 2 stanzas are as following. And as your mind collects its poison, its milk, your body holds you in its arms. Your sadness delivers itself into your organs. Worry drops pebbles into your stomach, and love evaporates and condensates onto the roof of your mouth, turning to vapor all that you once drowned in, hiding from you all the things that are too heavy for your soul to hold. So yes, that is The Anatomy of Being by Shinji Moon. I ended up giving this collection 4 stars to start with, and then I bumped it down to 3 because the more I thought about it, the less I liked it, which isn't a good sign. But I think it's going to stay at a solid 3 stars. I did really like the collection, and I'm very happy to support her as an artist. The next collection I'm going to talk about I read at the very beginning of July, and this is The World is Round by Nikky Finney. Nikky Finney is a U.S. writer. She is Black. She was born in Conway, South Carolina, and grew up in the southern United States. She also won the National Book Award for Poetry in 2011 for her collection Head Off and Split, which I haven't read yet, but I'm looking forward to getting to. These poems were stunning. Where the Shinji Moon collection felt very young and a little bit naive, you can tell that Nikky Finney has some more experience behind her and has been writing for a long time. So it's not necessarily fair to compare the two, but I just want to say that these are very different collections. These poems are very much about family and about how family shapes us. There are poems about race and about how her family's race has shaped her family, especially living in the South. And I really enjoyed a few poems in this collection that kind of highlight the matriarchal figures of her family, such as her mother, her grandmother, and her aunt. I thought they were all really beautiful. There's something about Nikky Finney's writing that's a little bit gritty. Like, she doesn't shy away from the hard images or the hard topics, but it's totally engrossing. It just wraps itself around you. And I was completely absorbed. I was like pacing around my house reading these poems out loud, and then I would finish one and I would love it and I would read it again. So I can highly, highly recommend this collection. And again, I will read you a little bit from one of my favorites. This poem is called The New Medicine, and it's about her visits home to her family as an adult. And I'm just going to read you the first section. Evening. I go home just to touch them. Rent a car that is newer than my own for the long drive there, to be sure I arrive without delay. First, the purple Tennessee mountains blur the wide hips of the windshield. Then, the blue tar-heeled air pours a southern-smelling salt across my skin. On the pedal, my foot feels relentless. I take the 8 hours in one bite. Before long, the fat 500 miles eat all the sun out of the sky. I am left a mere daughter driving on sheer blacktop desire to put my hands on them again. That night I slump, in a mother-daughter nest of repose, repossessed once again on her loud, flowery couch. My long fingers, delirious, spread, lost in between her bare brown feet, that underneath are sleeping jellyfish, on top squirming fiddler crabs. She talks and I stare, the garden of tiny lines around her mouth, new rosebuds, in but a month. I finger every bunion I can find, lingering pumpkin prayers in between the smooth hollows of a foot belonging to us both. I never drive home to see them, never arrive anxious to twist toward their echoing laughter. I travel mile after mile just to touch them. So that's just the first part of that poem. I really found it very touching and real, and as you can see, I'm in love with Nikky Finney. I think this collection is fabulous. I gave it 4 stars. I'm totally going to read everything else she's ever read because she's fantastic. The final collection I wanted to talk to you all about today is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Rupi Kaur is a young Canadian author. I don't know exactly how old she is. I'm going to guess she's in her 20s. I couldn't find it, but she is a little bit younger, and this collection is fabulous. This was published in 2014, and it is split into 4 sections. So the first section is called The Hurting, then you have The Loving, The Breaking, and The Healing. These poems, a little bit of a trigger warning, do deal with some sexual abuse and are graphically sexual in good ways as well at some points. They're very short, so I'll show you, and illustrated. So it's just, I found them to be very powerful and forceful kind of snippets of what Rupi Kaur felt or wanted to embody at the time that she wrote them. I really like this collection. I don't know if you can see all my tabs, but there are a lot. Well, the first 3 sections really deal with kind of the stages of a relationship, of a romantic relationship. The hurting section, the first section, kind of deals with how she was shaped and how she was taught to love in her childhood. Whereas the other 2 sections deal with how she did end up loving and how people ended up loving her as an adult. The final section delves into more universal themes of feminism and power and kind of reclaiming our bodies and our emotions. And I can't speak highly enough of what she's done here. And this is where kind of my ignorance about talking about poetry is going to show, is that in many of her poems she uses no punctuation, no capitalization. So while there are line breaks, it's hard to kind of feel the rhythm of the language, if you know what I mean. Like, it could be broken into sentences at any points, and the line breaks, you don't really want to stop after the line breaks. The poem doesn't rhyme. The poems don't rhyme. So that was interesting, and I experimented with reading a little bit of it out loud to myself. I do like to read poetry out loud to myself, y'all. I just woo myself day in and day out with all these poems. No, but I think that poetry is really meant to be spoken. Anyway, so I found that interesting, and it made the poems have almost like this rushed, hurried quality, like, I have to get this out right now, kind of like word vomit almost, but in a good way. Does that make sense? I should say, too, that a lot of the poems are untitled, which I thought was interesting. And so I will again read you one of my favorites, which is untitled, but I really liked it. This is from the 4th section in the book, so this is the healing section, which I kind of mentioned was my favorite part of the whole book. I like the way the stretch marks on my thighs look human, and that we're so soft yet rough and jungle wild when we need to be. I love that about us, how capable we are of feeling, how unafraid we are of breaking, and tend to our wounds with grace. Just being a woman, calling myself a woman, makes me utterly whole and complete. So again, that's one of the more poems that runs along the lines of the feminism that runs throughout this book, but some of it is more forceful than other parts, which is not a bad thing at all. I love this. I gave this 4 stars. I highly recommend it. It's a very quick read. You can read it in one sitting. I did. I think it took me less than an hour, because like I said, like, it's short. It's kind of thick for a collection of poetry, but like, that's how much text is on the page. So please pick this up if you have any interest at all in poetry or feminism or just beautiful things. So those are some poetry collections I read recently. Please let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if you like hearing about poetry on my channel. I think it's something that I will continue to be reading more of and continuing to talk about. And if you have any recommendations of poets that I should be reading right now, please let me know, because I am seriously getting into poetry again. I love it, and it's been awesome. So recommendations very much appreciated, because I haven't been following along, especially with more contemporary poets. And that is all. Goodbye!